Nurgle, also known as the Plague Lord, is the chaos god of disease, decay, and destruction, in particular the emotion of despair. He is known as Grandfather Nurgle, the Lord of Pestilence and the Lord of Decay. He is the oldest of the four chaos gods and is the most directly involved with the plight of mortals, particularly humans who suffer so acutely from the fear of death. While Nurgle is the god of death and decay, he is also the god of rebirth. After all, decay is simply one part of the cycle of life, without which no new life could grow. Nurgle is also the god of perseverance and survival. While those who wish to spread decay and corruption are certainly amongst his followers, there are also those who wish to endure, to become tough enough to handle the difficulties and opportunities presented by the uncaring universe full of sickness and disease. To understand what might otherwise seem contradictory or even perverse in nature, one must first comprehend that which Nurgle embodies. The citizens of the Imperium know full well that their lives will end one day, and that for many of their kin, life will be full of disease or other torments, yet they drive this knowledge deep into the corner of their minds and bury it with dreams and ceaseless activities. When a sick man understands the inescapable truth that death is coming, but refuses to die and instead endures the boils, scars, and pain because he fears death, that perseverance is an often overlooked fuel source for Nurgle, the unconscious response of all the sentient beings to the knowledge of their own ending. Nurgle himself takes the form of a titanic flesh hulk riddled with decay and pestilence. His gigantic carcass is bloated with corruption and exudes an overpowering stench that gnaws at the mind. His skin is greenish, leathery, and neurotoxic, its surface abundant with running sores, swelling boils, and fruitful infestations. Nurgle's gurgling and pulsating organs are rank with the excrements of decay, spilling and spurting through its ruptured skin to hang like obscene fruit through his girth. From these organs burst swarms of tiny Nurglings that chew at Grandfather Nurgle's rotting intestines and suck upon his bountiful noxic fumes. Every single human being in the galaxy has been touched by Nurgle's hand at some point. Countless trillions are host to malignant, invisible creations, which corrupt their physical form and sow despair in their minds. Interplanetary traffic ensures that contagious diseases are carried from world to world by the ignorant, the willful, and the strong. As Nurgle's gift multiply in full-blown epidemics, his power reaches a peak. Whole star systems, even whole sectors, are quarantined as plague runs rife across the stars. Proud civilizations wither away, even as Grandfather Nurgle conjures obscene new life from their remains. Wherever there are plague pits and mass graves, the rotting splendor of Nurgle shines through. Nurgle's sacred number is 7. His colors are those of rot and ruin, waste and vomit, mucus and pus. He is represented by the color of green and brown, the most putrid variation of each. Nurgle also embodies the will of mankind to struggle no matter what opposes it. Suffering, death, pain. Human beings push these things from their mind and try to forget them by living in the moment in the hopes that the future will be a better one. It has recently been uncovered by the Eldar Harlequins that Nurgle is in possession of the Eldar goddess Isha, who he rescued from Slaanesh's imprisonment, and he imprisoned her within his realm in the warp. Nurgle utilizes her for his experiments, creating a new disease to spread into the material universe. With her divine power of healing, Isha quickly regenerates from these tests, although Nurgle gathers what information he desires from the temporary effects. It is said that she secretly whispers the cures to those diseases to the mortals of the universe. Of the 4 great ruinous powers, Nurgle is said to be one of the most involved with the plights of mortals. Through the gift of raging fever and shaking chills, Nurgle's hand is upon them from cradle to grave. Few can escape the touch of Nurgle in their lives. He is sometimes called the Lord of All, because all things, no matter how strong and secure, fall to physical corruption and entropy in the end. The whispered prayer of a parent over a fever-struck child, the anguished pleas of a dying man for one more day of life, those are meat and drink to Nurgle. No life avoids decay, not even the false emperor. With all his deluded sacrificial supplicants and thousands of attending priests, none can elude the ravage of time and his eventual demise. The question is, what happens when the end comes? Nurgle is the answer to that question. Each inevitable ending brings with it an equal certain start to something new. When a Catachan spiker traps and consumes a careless Imperial Guardsman, the life of the soldier ends, and a new spiker grows. There is no ending that does not result in the hope of renewal. Truly, there is no being, no action, or outcome that does not further Nurgle's aims. In truth, Nurgle could simply sit back and wait for the universe to unfold according to his design. He is not content, however, to wait. He has too much energy, too much enthusiasm for his work to just sit idly by. From deep within his crevice, he brews contagions, both physical plagues and horrible ideas, and he and his followers then unleash them upon the mortal realm. He welcomes the resistance of those who attempt to deny him, for each time they erect defenses against his advances, he learns new ways to circumvent the opposition. Each cure breeds a newer, more powerful disease. Records of many sentient races of the galaxy often say that Nurgle corrupts, that he brings destruction to all. To a small extent they are correct, but their evaluation is narrow in scope and fail to grasp the greater truth. The more primitive races have a much better understanding of the undeniable nature of the Master of Certitude. Life is struggle and erosion. To face the dawn is to await the dusk, and in return, to endure the night. On a grand scale, if a being had a luxury of observing the rise and fall of empires, of seeing the birth of the suns, and their eventual collapse into swirling masses of cosmic destruction, the observer would surely recognize the rightful place of Nurgle as the shepherd of destiny. It is only Nurgle's fondness of rot for disease and decay that prevents more from accepting his truth. It can be difficult for a mortal to accept that the rotting of a limb or the explosion of his entrails is a blessing. Even the decrepit Emperor of Man, who is enslaved on his golden throne, sits as a testament of Nurgle's greatness. Each day 1,000 souls give their fleshy bodies and immortal souls to this false idol in a vain attempt to preserve his rotting presence. It is a losing battle, but the ammunition spent in the conflict, the human bodies sent to their wasted doom, does indeed serve a purpose. Nurgle's purpose. Each mortal that falls sustains new life and new hope. Over the course of their lives, mortals sustain injuries, become infested, sickened, and succumb to their wounds, or more simply, to age. It is impossible to escape deterioration, and yet people try. It is the embracing grandfather who encourages these followers to defy the doom of mortal corruption and instead use it as a source of strength and inspiration. All Chaos Gods have a dual nature, but Nurgle, more so than any other, understands that the supposedly separate elements of his essence actually work together in a self-sustaining cycle, rather than standing apart from one another as different explanations of the same thing. The seers of the Elder Craft Worlds and the Inquisition will never share this truth with the weak-minded fools who drink in their lies like mother's milk. For a Lord of Chaos, Nurgle's actions seem oddly harmonious, caring even. To receive the blessing of Nurgle, all one has to do is want to live and be willing to do whatever it takes to cling to life. If decay comes at the hands of Nurgle, via the thrust of a rusted blade or the unleashing of a plague, many will curse his name, for those who are unable to see that this pain and suffering lifts the veil that hides the truth of life and death. Some blessed mortals are able to look beyond the putrescine and see the decay of what is, a gift from the Lord of all. This gift, regardless of the form it takes, opens eyes even as it liquefies them. It simultaneously atrophies the leg muscles of its recipients and gives them strength to march forward to greatness. Nurgle's great ambition to speed this universe toward its end by eroding the foundations of reality, much as disease has eroded the spirit and bodies of those he infests. There will come a time when reality will collapse entirely, and the universe will begin a massive transformation. The old ways will be swept aside. All that was will cease to be, and from the rot and ruins, a new glorious reality will emerge, one dominated by Nurgle and his beloved children. Few who pledge themselves to Nurgle do so in the belief that he offers an easy path to power and glory. He does not promise increased influence, brutal strength, or hedonistic excess like his fellows. Most mortals who find their way into Nurgle's embrace wish only for an end to some sort of suffering. Despite his horrific appearance, Nurgle is a warm, welcoming god who prides himself on the achievements of his followers, gifting them with his own hideous diseases even as he protects them from all pain and cold sleep of death. The fear of death can be found in the heart of all sentient beings of the universe, and so there is no shortage of mortals of every species present in the galaxy willing to sacrifice their immortal souls in the return for the corrupted preservation of their physical bodies for all time. Many of Nurgle's followers worship him by no choice of their own, the taint of Nurgle spreading readily amongst beasts and humanoids alike. The awful arcane illness known as Nurgle's rot may strike even the strongest person and cause him or her to be outcasted as a leper. Nurgle takes an interest in the victims of the diseases he unleashes, caring for them in a manner similar to a loving grandfather, for which reason he is frequently referred to as Grandfather Nurgle by his servants. On some occasions, Nurgle's embrace is desired by his would-be followers, and so causes some that would have otherwise never been infected to seek out the disease, and even poison themselves to earn his favor. It is their belief that those who die, caught in the grip of one of Nurgle's terrible diseases, are swept directly into his realm. Those that sing the praises of Nurgle loud enough are sometimes spared, so that they could spread their blessing further, becoming his champion. Those that fashion themselves champion of Nurgle represent a dire threat to densely populated worlds, where close-packed populations are vulnerable to a single contagion. Ships in the void are particularly vulnerable to the disease, and many dying crew have called upon the Lord of Decay for his mercy, after his champions have spread Nurgle's rot throughout the ship. Such was the fate of the Death Guard Space Marine Legion, when it became marooned in the warp on the long journey to Terra during the Horus Heresy. While they lay becalmed in the Immaterium, a mysterious contagion spread from one to another of the Death Guard's void ships until the entire fleet was infected. Even the reinforced physiology of the Space Marines could not fight off the dire plague, as it bloated the guts, distended the flesh, and rotted its victims from the inside. It is said that when even the Legion's Primarch, Mortarion, fell victim to the plague, he cried out to the ruinous powers of chaos in his delirium. His desperation to save himself and his legion called forth Nurgle, and Mortarion became his greatest champion. These Chaos Space Marines became known as the Plague Marines, his most potent mortal servants. Thus, the Death Guard Legion has enjoyed the favor of Nurgle for the last 10,000 standard years. To get more info on these guys, please check out our 40 Facts video on the Death Guard. Nurgle is the age-old enemy of the Chaos God Tzeentch, the Lord of Change. Their energies come from dynamically opposite beliefs. Tzeentch's power derives from hope and changing fortune, while Nurgle's comes from the defiance born out of desire and hopelessness. The followers of Nurgle often pit themselves against those of Tzeentch in complex political intrigues in the mortal realm, forever attempting to mirror his schemes, for change is dull-minded self-interests. Nurgle and Tzeentch are in many ways diametrically opposed, for at the heart of the matter, the changer of ways seeks to build even more complex and improbable webs of power, while Nurgle embodies continuous growth, destruction, and renewal. The Garden of Nergal is no ordinary garden. Perhaps it is not a garden at all, but the mortal minds that contemplate the manifested will of the Lord of Decay must attempt to make some sort of sense out of what they have seen or heard about in whispered tales. The same tomes that other forbidden texts have attempted to describe the Lord of the Land himself have for the most part agreed that the idea of Nurgle's realm is being a perverse, deadly, and yet strangely beautiful garden best put chaos into terms they can fathom. Like a normal garden, the domain of Nurgle is home to a bewildering array of flora and fauna, all interconnected and supporting the whole. Beds of bright blue shovel petal plants dig themselves up and leave the dirt in which they grew so that the plague bearers can plant new skull seeds in the rich looms. As the skull seeds grow and blossom, they attract bounding, stomping chaos beasts that mistake their fruit for the head of new playthings. This scatters their matter violently into the air, where it comes to rest on the wings of huge flies. Slowed by the sticky lump of the splattered plants, these insects become easy prey for other flying creatures that ingest them as they soar through the rot-filled air. Unbeknownst to the predators, bloated flies are carriers of many of Nurgle's experimental diseases and other creations. With their innards thus infected, these predators sicken, vomiting the content of their guts all across the garden as they fly about and eventually explode in showers of life-giving flesh and blood. The bounty of mutated and mutilated tissue fall into the new areas of the garden beneath, decaying into a compost and starting the cycle of life and death anew. A visitor in this bizarre and perilous realm doesn't walk from this place to that. He experiences what needs to be experienced. Even the demons that tend the garden are not really what might be thought of as a workforce that arrive at a place, does a job, and then leaves for other regions. These demons are a part of the experience of the garden itself. This is especially troublesome for the plague bearers, whose metamorphosed minds were once mortal and still strive to impose a sense of reality in this unreal existence. A visitor of Nurgle's realm would find a dizzying amount of diversity of experiences. Here he might find trees made of nothing but the flesh of Eldar, constantly oozing the tears of a dying race. There is no telling what wonders await around each bend in the path that stretches and winds throughout the garden, but any who encounter them will surely have their sanity tested and questioned, should they survive to share the tale. The Garden of Nergal is an ever-changing realm, shifting according to the needs and whims of its master. Many areas exist only temporarily, taking shape to allow him to indulge a particular fancy, or to be granted to an especially accomplished great unclean one as a reward. The legends hint that some aspects of this domain remain relatively constant. Nurgle has need of fields in which to plant his crops, or blighten herbs, pits to hold the bodies upon which he conducted his experiments. Most important of all, a gigantic and decrepit mansion in which to store his creations, brew his legendary contagions, entertain guests, and plot the course of the great corruption. Jutting from amidst the primordial mulch in Nurgle's home, decrepit and ancient yet eternally strong at its foundation, the mansion is an electric structure of rotten timber and broken walls, overgrown with crawling poison ivy and thick moss. Within these tumbling walls, Nurgle toils beneath mildewed and sagging beams. The great god works for eternity at a rusted cauldron, vast enough to contain all the oceans of the world. Churning and murmuring to himself, Nurgle labors to create contagions and pestilences, the most sublime and unfeeded forms of life. With every stir of Nurgle's maggot-riddled ladle, a dozen fresh diseases flourish and are scattered throughout the stars. From time to time, Nurgle reaches down with a clawed hand to scoop a portion of the ghastly mixture into his cavernous mouth, tasting the fruits of his labor. With each passing day, he comes closer to brewing his perfect disease, a spiritual plague that will spread across the extent of the universe and see all living things gather onto its rotting embrace. Dwarfed by their mighty lord, a host of plague bearers are gathered about Nurgle, each chanting, keeping count of the diseases created, the mischievous Nurglings that have hatched, and the souls claimed by the Lord of Decay. When Nurgle's diseases wax strong in the mortal realm, his garden blooms with death heads and fresh filth, encroaching upon the lands of other chaos gods. War follows as Nurgle's adversaries fight back. The plague bearers take up arms to defend the morbid forest. From such wars spring more of the richness of life and death, of triumph over diversity. Though Nurgle's realm will eventually recede again, it will have fed deeply on the fallen, and will lie in peace until it is ready to swell throughout time and space once more. Nurgle is unlike the other ruinous powers in many ways, including how he views his domain within the realm of chaos. Nurgle cherishes the beauty and surprise of his garden. He routinely takes strolls down its twisted paths, talking with his demons and stopping to observe as one of his diseases takes its toll on a wounded captive. In his wandering outside of the mansion, he passes by some of his favorite places, many of which have existed since Nurgle first thought of them, and are likely to be the models of the reborn universe that is to come. A moment's journey from the mansion are the Dead Beds, a place he visits more often than perhaps any other. It is a place that serves two purposes. Not only are wayward travelers and defeated invaders trapped here, stored in the deep pits and sucking muck of this place awaiting some future foul use, or their eventual demise, but it is here that Nurgle can indulge in one of his greatest forms of entertainment. The Plague Father loves to hear the stories of the realms beyond his own. They inspire him to create new pestilences that are well suited to other lands, and in the deathbeds he has countless potential storytellers. Sometimes he offers these unfortunates the chance to improve their position by spitting the worms from their mouths and sharing tales of their worlds within. Those who amuse him sufficiently are plucked from the muck and removed to the mansion. There they have the great honor of becoming vessels for Nurgle's newest plagues. After visiting the deathbeds, Nurgle often makes the Poxy Yards the next stop on his stroll. It is here that he tests the efficiency of his contagions of the flesh and spirit. Each malignant requires a different set of trials to gauge its ability to achieve the Plague Father's desire. This means that the physical form of the Poxy Yards change to suit the task. For a test of the spirit, this region of the garden may be filled with crystal clear lakes. A dehydrated test subject may see these lakes and believe salvation is at hand. Drink deep of the cool water. Suddenly, the water will turn to pus, tormenting the sick and weakening his soul. For the test of skin-eating diseases, the Poxy Yards may be filled with claw-thrust brandles. Infected captives can be sent running into the demon plants, chased by chaos beasts. If the captives scream as they pass through the razor-edged branches of the plants, then Nurgle knows that the poor wretches can still feel pain, and his affliction needs refinement. All of these regions provide Nurgle with the ingredients and insight he needs to further his work at the Cauldron when he returns to the mansion after one of his walks. The Hanging Garden of Thush Bolg are a sight to be seen. This remote slice of Nurgle's realm was given to the Great Unclean One, Thush Bolg, as acknowledgement of his use of choking plague to wipe out the orc infestation on Hurax, a planet that Nurgle coveted. To commemorate his victory and to demonstrate constant thanks to his lord for his reward, Thush Bolg uses their own intestines to hang every single orc from the colony in the tree of his domain. There they dangle and rot, slowly dying but never quite finding release. The demons of Nurgle are truly putrid in their appearance and sickening to look upon. Their flesh pulses with the fever heat of corruption. Their innards push through lesions in their putrid skin, and their bodies ooze with sticky slime. Yet in contrast to their hideous appearance, Nurgle's demons are cheerful, energetic beings that show a disturbing friendliness. They are happy in their work and show great pride in their accomplishments, interpreting the groans of the afflicted as expressions of gratitude justly won by their efforts. Nurglings are tiny mischievous demons who are small face smiles of Nurgle himself. These rotund imps normally appear in large numbers, forming swarms which accompany armies dedicated to Nurgle. Plague bearers are rotting, wasted creatures of vaguely humanoid size and appearance. With a single burning eye, these vile lesser demons form the rank and file of the Plague Father's pestilent legion. Flies continually buzz around them, therefore making them more difficult to fight. The many diseases carried by these demons can be used for terrible effects during battle. High-ranking plague bearers are known amongst the demonic legions as plague drones, a title that conveys commendable humility. These overseers of Nurgle's realm ride inside real space mounted upon rotflies. From their low-fee position, the plague drones can properly tally the diseases running rife across the battlefield, as well as swiftly intervene should Nurgle's divine plan meet with heavy armed resistance. Rotflies are colossal demonic insects whose appearance is so repugnant that it scares the mind. These vile creatures are the most loathsome of Nurgle's creation. Only the forbidden tome of the Eldar Black Library speaks of the forbidden process by which these creatures are birthed, for they hatch in the sticky depths of Nurgle's garden in the realm of chaos, where the visionary wander in their dream. Beasts of Nurgle are truly horrendous demonic aberrations. They have the soft, sticky, and molted body of a pallid slug, webbed feet that flap uselessly, a face of writhing green tentacles, and a whiptail growth that bursts from its back, which wags constantly from side to side. Slimehounds are foul creatures resembling a putrid, overgrown, mutated slug. Great Unclean Ones are undoubtedly the foulest of the demonic servants of the ruinous powers. Each of these greater demons are shaped in the fashion of Nurgle himself. Massive, bloated disease carriers whose decaying flesh bulge with corpulent cancer. They usually carry a great rust blade known as the Plague Sword into battle, said to be dipped in the foul pus and contagions that lies at the base of Nurgle's throne in the warp. They are the most powerful of Nurgle's demons and generally act as the leaders and father figures of other demons of the Plague Lord, epitomizing Nurgle's joyful, paternal nature. Epidemus is Nurgle's chosen tallyman, one of the 7 protectors of pestilence, and the cataloger of all the Plague Lord's diseases. Epidemus' task is an unending one, and it generates a great deal of paperwork, so he rides a palanquin to share the burden, and to more easily force a path through Nurgle's hordes. 24 Nurglings attend the tallyman's every need, providing the parchment, excreting the ink for the quill pens, and even defending Epidemus from harm should a foolish enemy venture too close. The vile Savants are horrific manifestations of the demonic diseases that claim mortal lives, and appear as putrescent remains of flesh they wore. The vile Savants are avatars of plague and destruction. They appear as figures wearing sealed containment suits that are slick with filth and beaded with moisture like sweat on fevered skin. Inside, there is nothing but putrefied liquid flesh and withering vermin, held together by the sagging structures of the suit. A palpable aura of utter horror and rotting miasma surround them, and to simply be unfortunate enough to witness these awful things is terrifying. Worse still is to hear their buzzing voice inside one's head, or become the subject of their experimentation in the death of flesh. A plague swarm is a demonic force of mindless destruction that materializes in the universe as a rippling mass of locusts, beetles, flies, or other such creatures, twisted into utterly horrific forms. These hellish swarms move as one unholy mass, stripping flesh from the victims as they pass, tainting and destroying everything they touch. The inspiration of Nurgle comes from the ancient Babylonian god Nergal. Portrayed in hymns and myths as the god of war and pestilence, Nurgle, or Nergal, seems to represent the sun of noontime and of the summer solstice that brings destruction. Nurgle is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as the deity of the city of Cultha, and the men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, and the men of Koth made Nergal. That is an excerpt from the Bible. According to the rabbis, his emblem was a cock, and Nurgle means dung-hilled cock, although standard iconography pictures Nurgle as a lion.